Now who goes and looks for some good clean fun in a deep dark cave? Not me. But in all seriousness, watching a horde of grey, slithery, bloodthirsty creatures cursed to eternal darkness chase and bite chunks out of 6 innocent women is still an image that sits with me to this day. Released way back in 2005, some of you might say that The Descent is an old film. Now with a lot of these golden oldies from let's call it a different cinematic age, they kind of lose their impact, their edge, their shock value, and dare I might say, as time goes by, some of them even become a little bit cheesy, especially when scrutinized under the modern eye. So a question that I've been asking myself, and one that I bring to you, dear fan of horror, is does Niel Marshall's The Descent, which back in the day truly was a ruthless horror fest packed with a suffocating claustrophobic atmosphere, does it still hold up, truly hold up today? And more importantly, will The Descent gain entry into the mausoleum of madness, the tomb of terror? Will it spawn a place of its very own amongst the horror greats within the Den of Horror? After making the infuriatingly underrated werewolf slasher comedy Dog Soldiers, Niel Marshall was understandably a little bit wary of becoming typecast as a horror director. Thankfully though, he did decide to follow that horror up with another horror movie, one that would become a bona fide hit, but also one that would exemplify the strengths of a good horror movie. Now in a few moments we're going to take a look at some of the factors that I believe make The Descent such a great little horror movie. And by the way, feel free to comment and give me your own take on it. This film was very successful, especially considering that it was an independent horror movie. But please don't think that by dropping a group of youngsters into a dark cave where deadly creatures of the night happen to be lurking, that this in some way guarantees a film's success. On the contrary, a film called The Cave was released at the same time and practically had the exact same premise. But The Cave holds, and I do hate to say this, a deserved 12% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's not because the film lacked style, it has style. It's not because it lacked a big budget, it had an even bigger budget than The Descent. And it's not because it lacked amazing sets and great CGI, it had all of that. But it lacked the very aspects that make The Descent such a good and intensely terrifying movie. So what are the secret ingredients that set The Descent apart from so many other horror movies? Well, for one, you actually have well-written, fleshed out, real, relatable characters that are plunged into a world of darkness that is so claustrophobically lung-squishing that it makes The Descent almost painful to watch. Something else that The Descent gets right, and this is something that could be easily overlooked, is that Niel Marshall focuses on the 6 female protagonists rather than on the creatures. I mean, this is something that a lot of horror movies do, right? Sort of focus on the bad guy, the thing that's going to draw the crowds. Niel Marshall doesn't do this. Instead of putting his creatures front and center, he treats them like phantoms, always shrouded in darkness and in the shadows. He almost renders them into the realm of the unknown. And this adds an element of omnipresent menace that makes the movie so intriguing. I really admire it, not to mention enjoy it, when a filmmaker has enough confidence in their story and their characters that the gore and the blood and the monsters aren't necessarily fed to us on a silver platter to the point that they become cliched and toothless. Now don't get me wrong, The Descent does not pull any punches. It is by all means a claustrophobic, atmospheric horror masterpiece led by an all-female cast. And talking about the female cast, every single one of those actresses in that film give a compelling performance. Now, as far as standout scenes go, The Descent has many, but I will honestly never forget the one where our 6 girls first encounter the creatures. Sheezums, jumping between conventional camera angles and shaky found footage shots taken by one of the cave climbers with her handheld. This first encounter scene becomes a visceral, loud nightmare steeped in darkness. When the group realizes that the cave that they're trapped in is crawling in pale death, this is the moment that the descent literally descends into chaos. Jaw-clenching, nerve-wracking chaos. And the slow but tense build-up to the scene is a lesson to all filmmakers in tension and foreboding. Simply brilliant, truly terrifying. Now, what didn't work about the descent? I've heard some critics say that the creatures could have had a backstory. Personally, I completely disagree with this. Like I mentioned earlier, I thought the less is more approach really worked in this case. Another thing is the descent's overall feel. This is not easy viewing. It's quite a depressing movie. So if you're expecting a horror movie with a light touch, maybe a bit of a love story in the background, some humor, maybe a horror movie in the mold of Scooby-Doo, oh no, this one is not for you. But the movie always maintains its style and it sticks to what it does best, which is tell a simple but character-driven story about survival and about venturing into a world that will not play by your rules. So how scary was and still is The Descent? Well, with scenes like I just mentioned and plenty of others thrown in there, mixed in with the film's overall dark, suffocating atmosphere, The Descent scores a deadly axe on the meter of fear. So nearly 20 years later, can we say that The Descent still holds up? Honestly, I feel that it does. The story also has the added advantage, of course, of not really relying too much on the sort of gadgetry or technology that would pin it down to a specific age. Also, the story is relevant and it is imminently scary. And as for entry into the hallowed Den of Horror, all I can say is that The Descent has cordially been invited to take its place amongst some of its great influences, such as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Aliens, and interestingly enough, also Deliverance. So if you've seen The Descent, what did you think of it? Because I'm going to make a bold statement here, and I'm going to say The Descent is probably one of the greatest horror movies of the last 30 years. I know that's a bold statement. In fact, I'm also going to say that I completely regret not mentioning it in my 50 greatest horror movies of all time episode. So that list definitely needs some revision. Maybe 2023 will see that list being revised. A thoughtful subscriber, Voice of Reason, once mentioned a movie called As Above, So Below, which I have reviewed. I feel that The Descent paved the way for movies just like that. And by the way, speaking about great movies, if there are any other films that you think deserve a place right here in the Den of Horror, let me know. And maybe I'll take a look at it and we'll see if we can find a place for it here. By the way, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, do all of that kind of funky stuff, but most importantly, stay safe, stay happy, and stay horror. Cheers, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful week.